masters of war, tactics and strategies from ancient empires. Throughout history, warfare has been both an art and a science, shaping the destinies of empires. From the disciplined formations of Greece to the clever ambushes of Carthage, each ancient empire developed its own distinctive strategies, turning the tide of battles and securing their place in history. These masters of war revolutionized tactics, teaching lessons of courage, cunning, and strategy that would echo through the ages. Their legacies endure, etched in the chronicles of military history. Chapter 1. The Greek Phalanx and the Power of Unity. In the rocky terrain of ancient Greece, warfare was a way of life. Greek city-states like Athens and Sparta built formidable armies, but it was Sparta that perfected one of the most effective and enduring formations in military history, the phalanx. The phalanx was a tightly packed formation where soldiers, known as hoplites, stood shoulder to shoulder, each bearing a large, round shield and a long spear. This formation allowed the Greeks to create a nearly impenetrable wall, with each man protecting his neighbor. The phalanx was particularly effective in narrow passes or flat terrain, where it could hold off even larger forces. The phalanx's strength lay not only in its defensive capability, but in the discipline it demanded. Each soldier had to trust the man beside him, creating a bond that held them together even in the fiercest battles. In wars against the Persian Empire, Greek forces used the phalanx to halt invasions and defend their homeland, most famously at the Battle of Marathon, where the Athenians defeated a much larger Persian force. The lesson of the phalanx was simple but profound. Unity and discipline could overcome even overwhelming odds. Chapter 2. The Persian Empire and the Art of Psychological Warfare. The Persian Empire was one of the largest and most powerful empires in ancient history, stretching from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River. Known for its vast, multicultural armies, the Persian military often used psychological tactics to intimidate their foes. The Persian kings, particularly Darius the Great and Xerxes, amassed armies so large that the sight of them alone could weaken an enemy's resolve. At the Battle of Thermopylae, Xerxes' army reportedly numbered in the hundreds of thousands, dwarfing the Greek forces. The Persians also made strategic use of propaganda, sending messengers to enemy cities with exaggerated accounts of their army's size and might, hoping to win battles without a single blow. In addition to overwhelming numbers, the Persians employed chariots fitted with scythe-like blades to mow down enemy troops, enhancing the psychological impact. They also introduced elephants into battle, an unusual sight for their enemies that could create panic among soldiers unaccustomed to these massive creatures. By using psychological warfare, the Persians taught the ancient world that sometimes the mere threat of force was as powerful as force itself. Chapter 3. Hannibal of Carthage and the Art of Deception. One of history's greatest military minds, Hannibal Barca of Carthage, understood that a successful campaign required more than brute strength. It demanded cunning. During the Second Punic War against Rome, Hannibal led his army across the Alps, a feat thought impossible, catching the Romans off guard. This was only the beginning of his masterful use of deception and strategy. At the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, Hannibal executed one of the most famous tactical maneuvers in history, known as the double envelopment. Facing a much larger Roman force, Hannibal arranged his troops in a crescent shape with his weakest soldiers in the center. As the Romans pushed forward, Carthaginian forces retreated just enough to draw them in deeper. When the Roman army was fully committed, Hannibal's cavalry swept around the sides, trapping the Romans in a deadly embrace. The double envelopment at Cannae was a devastating victory for Carthage, leaving tens of thousands of Roman soldiers dead. Hannibal's tactics became legendary, teaching future generals the value of deception and the importance of understanding an enemy's weaknesses. His legacy endured, influencing military strategies for centuries to come. Chapter 4. The Roman legions and the evolution of flexibility. The Roman Empire is often remembered for its discipline and organization, and its legions were the backbone of its military might. Unlike the rigid formations of the Greeks, the Romans developed a more adaptable system known as the manipular formation. Each legion was divided into smaller units called manipules, which allowed the army to respond swiftly to changing battlefield conditions. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, Scipio Africanus used the flexibility of the Roman legions to counter Hannibal's war elephants. Instead of the typical dense formation, Scipio arranged his troops in staggered lines, creating lanes for the elephants to charge through harmlessly. This adaptation neutralized Carthage's advantage and led Rome to victory, ending the Second Punic War. Roman generals also learned the importance of strategic infrastructure. They built fortified camps and roads wherever they went, ensuring their legions could move swiftly and stay supplied. This combination of flexibility and logistical foresight made the Roman legions nearly unstoppable, setting the foundation for an empire that would last centuries. Chapter 5. The Mongol Empire and the Power of Mobility. The Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, unleashed a form of warfare that terrified the medieval world. Known for their speed, endurance, and unrelenting ferocity, the Mongols were masters of horseback warfare and developed strategies that used mobility as their greatest weapon. Mongol warriors were highly trained archers who could shoot with deadly accuracy from horseback, even at full gallop. Their tactics included feigned retreats, where they would lure an enemy into a trap by pretending to flee. When the pursuing force was worn out and disorganized, the Mongols would suddenly turn and strike with devastating speed. The Mongols' emphasis on mobility allowed them to cover vast distances quickly, launching surprise attacks and overwhelming their enemies before they could mount a proper defense. Their campaigns stretched from China to Europe, creating one of the largest empires in history. The Mongol style of warfare reshaped military thinking, emphasizing the importance of speed, adaptability, and psychological warfare. Chapter 6. The Byzantine Empire and the use of strategic fortifications. The Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, faced centuries of attacks from various fronts, but managed to endure through skillful use of strategic fortifications and defensive tactics. The capital, Constantinople, was protected by the Theodosian Walls, a series of double walls and a moat that made the city nearly impregnable. One of the Byzantines' most effective tactics was the use of Greek fire, an incendiary weapon that could burn even on water. Greek fire was a closely guarded secret used to repel naval attacks and strike terror into enemy fleets. When the Arab fleet attempted to capture Constantinople in 717 CE, the Byzantines used Greek fire to destroy the enemy ships, preserving their empire. The Byzantines also relied on diplomacy and espionage, skillfully playing rival powers against each other to avoid direct conflicts whenever possible. Their combination of strategic defense and shrewd political maneuvering allowed them to survive long after the Western Roman Empire fell, showing that sometimes survival was as much about caution as it was about combat. Chapter 7. The Chinese Art of War and the Rise of Sun Tzu. Ancient China produced one of history's most influential military texts, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Written around the 5th century BCE, this treatise on strategy and tactics distilled the essence of warfare into a set of principles that emphasized adaptability, deception, and knowledge of both oneself and the enemy. One of Sun Tzu's core teachings was that victory often lay in avoiding conflict. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, he wrote. His philosophy encouraged generals to use deception, psychological tactics, and diplomacy to achieve their goals without risking unnecessary lives. During the Warring States period, Chinese generals applied Sun Tzu's teachings to unify the land. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, applied the art of war's principles in his campaign to conquer the rival states, eventually uniting China under his rule. Sun Tzu's emphasis on strategy over brute force revolutionized military thinking not only in China, but across the world. His writings remain relevant to this day, influencing generals, politicians, and business leaders alike. Chapter 8. Legacy of the Masters of War. The tactics and strategies of these ancient empires laid the foundation for modern warfare. From the disciplined formations of the Greek phalanx to the psychological tactics of the Persians and the adaptability of the Roman legions, each empire contributed to a deeper understanding of warfare.